when we discussed the topic of the first lecture, I thought it would be very appropriate to talk about the value of knowledge itself. Yes, it's like, okay, why should we set up even this association? What is it that knowledge gives us? You know, is it actually valuable, or would I be happier being ignorant? Yeah. Will be happier being ignorant. So let's start if you want. And I have chosen to start with Saint Augustine here. You can see him here. And when you read his Confessions, yes, he tells us this. He says that in the ordinary course of study, when he was 19 years old, I fell upon a certain book of Cicero, and it was called the Hortensius. Yes. I longed with an incredibly burning desire for an immortality of wisdom. So the good thing about St. Augustine is, you have to approach these topics with an open mind. And at first you can think, oh, St. Augustine, it will be theology, it will be Catholicism. Well, actually, when you read his Confessions, which not only means that he confesses something bad, it means a transformation. Yeah? Confession means that he transforms and he becomes a Christian. Yeah? But this process is extremely interesting because he is a human being that suffers and loves and takes the wrong turn in life, you know. So his life is very interesting. And he's telling us that when he was 19, he discovers this book called the Hortensius. And the Hortensius was a philosophical dialogue that Cicero wrote that tried to defend the value of knowledge. Unfortunately for us, this dialogue is now lost. Yeah. But look at him, yeah, and this is why I think this picture is very appropriate, because you can see him with his heart, yes. And actually, I recommend every one of you to read a little bit about St. Augustine, because he writes with the heart. And this is incredible for someone who lived 1,600 years ago, yes. So, okay, St. Augustine is telling us that he discovered the Hortensius, and he became very passionate about knowledge. What I came with here is my own Hortensius. It's not quite the Hortensius, but it's the universe in a nutshell from Stephen Hawking. I don't know if you guys know about this book, yes. But when I was, I would say 11 or 12, something like this, I asked my mom, you know, it's like, what do I have to study to learn everything about the cosmos, actually, because I was very interested since I was a little kid about the universe. And she said, oh, but you have to study physics. I said, I'm going to buy you a really cool book on physics. Yeah? And she bought me this book. And when I read it, I was 11, 12, I became like fascinated. I became fascinated by it. And this is why then I said, okay, it's going to be my life purpose to become a physicist. I didn't know about differential geometry back then. I didn't know it would be it would be horrible, and that I would be sweating a lot. But I made it through, and I don't regret it. Yes. So, for example, as I say, for me, I feel a deep connection with St. Augustine because his Hortensius and my Hortensius, you know, they changed our life. But do you think that, and maybe you have felt this also, do you think that it gave me happiness, you know? Do you think that when I started reading about these and I started sharing my ideas with other people, do you think I really felt happy, or were people saying, yeah, but this is what you're talking about is very complicated, you know, and I don't really care about this. Like, why should I care about what's happening inside of black holes, you know? So here's why I chose Picasso here, the old guitarist, to signify that knowledge can also make us feel sad sometimes and lonely. Yes, I don't know if you have felt this anytime before, but sometimes you want to try to convey the beauty, and then you get nothing in response. So you do feel lonely sometimes. Yes, it does make you feel disconnected. Yes, the same happens when you think about the life of those, for example, that still believe in astrology, or that are easily swayed into extremist opinions. You know, it's like, well, these people are just going with the herd, right? It's like, am I actually happy when I see when I read about what I like? Well, I don't really know. Maybe I would be happier if I wasn't ignorant, and I would be told what to do. Maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. Yes. So one of the most interesting depictions of the feeling that I'm talking about is in Goethe's Werther. Werther was we could say the first romantic novel, in the late 1700s, and basically Werther is a guy who falls in love with the wrong girl, and then he shoots himself. But he has one interaction with a fool. And he says, well, he sees the fool trying to pick up flowers in the winter, yes, with a lot of snow. He tries to pick up roses, and he says, well, maybe I envy you that you're trying to look for roses in a time when there are no flowers. Maybe I would be happier like this, yes? So, as I say, is ignorance bliss, yeah? Is ignorance bliss? Well, there are many authors that have asked themselves these questions. Yeah, amongst them I have two here. And here we start with the Italians. Boethius, the first one, yes, he was a philosopher that lived around 500 after the death of Christ, and he writes. He has a very beautiful, powerful book called The Consolations of Philosophy. Yes. And in this book, he's going to be prosecuted, and he's going to be executed, actually, for trying to defend a good management. He was a politician, yes, but they incarcerated him, and they were going to execute him, and before he was executed, well, he was in prison, he wrote The Consolations of Philosophy, trying to say, all right, but despite everything that is happening in my life, I am a wise man, and knowledge is beautiful. Okay, he did his best, yeah. And then we also have Petrarca in the 14th century. He writes a book called the Secretum Meum, My Secret, and this is a fascinating book. He also he has a conversation with Saint Augustine, figuratively, and he tries to ask him his doubts. Exactly what I'm talking about. It's like when I love, why do I suffer when I love? Why do I suffer when I know so much? Why do I pursue fame if I shouldn't? If I'm a good Christian, it should be enough. So it's full of contradictions, but it's the birth of the individual, I would say. Petrarca, for real, is the first humanist. Yes, like the first real humanist. So, as you can see, both Boetius and Petrarca, they both try to come up with a consolation for the question that I'm asking, if ignorance is bliss. They are trying to come up with a consolation, but I'm not looking for a consolation. I'm looking for a motivation, yes, because I don't like Stoic philosophy. I know that there are benefits to Stoic philosophy, but I think there is more to it. I think human beings are passionate as well, yeah. So we need motivations, yeah. And this is what I set up to do in some months ago. Actually, I came up with this dialogue myself that is called Agathon. It's in Spanish, but if you're interested, I could send you the rough English translation. And in Agathon, Agathon was a poet of the time of Socrates, yes. Here you have Agathon, and here you have Socrates, yes. So Agathon is a poet that is going to try to ask Socrates, okay, but am I happier the more I know? Yeah. And this conversation, I think it's interesting because I involve poetry, yes, and reason, yeah. Because I think that these questions that involve feelings, they cannot only be solved by syllogisms and reason, yes. It's more about the heart as well. So what I'm going to try to do in these few minutes is to try to teach you what I wrote and the kind of arguments that I have, and see if I can convince you that the more you know, the happier you are. And there are millions of ways to do this, yes. I mean, there are millions of ways one could answer to the question that I posed. But I hope that this is one of them, one answer, that will arrive at the beaches of the people who need them most. So it's like a message in the bottle, and hopefully anyone here or who are seeing us on camera will treasure it, yes. So we can start with a review of the question itself by, for example, first asking us ourselves, what is knowledge for? Yes. So obviously, human beings need knowledge to survive. Yes, that is the first thing. That is the first thing we can come up with, because we didn't always live in buildings, and we didn't always ride the bus. We were living in the savannah, and we were living in the jungle as well. Yes, so knowing what kind of footprints were in the floor, were in the ground, was a good way to determine if we were being chased by a cheetah or we were being chased by a wild boar. Yes, so or to distinguish where was our prey. Yes, so we need knowledge to survive. Yes, and how do we increase our knowledge? It's like coming up with new ideas, yes? And this is one of the first paintings that I will show you is the School of Athens from Raphael, yes? The Italians here. And this painting is very beautiful. It's here we have Plato. He's holding the Timaeus. Is basically his dialogue about how the world was created, yes? And here we have Aristotle, and he has the Ethics here. And Plato is pointing up, and Aristotle is saying, no, here. What is he saying? It's like they are both saying that knowledge, Plato is saying that knowledge is grounded on forms, yes? So on the intellect is reason. And Aristotle says, no, but you have to look, so it's induction, yes? So you have to look at the world first, and then derive with reason. So you can see how this painting is majestic, yes? It's majestic. It summarizes the Greek ancient tradition of philosophy perfectly, yes? So then, in the dialogue, for example, we also deal with the types of knowledge, and the way I thought about it, and let's see if you agree with it, is that knowledge is like an iceberg. Yes, first you have a very superficial area here, a layer. Yes, but then there is a submerged. It's 90% submerged as well. Why do I say this? Because I think about knowledge, about superficial knowledge that only cares about facts and dates, it's like when was the Battle of Verdun, and then the profound knowledge, which is trying to connect the facts. Yeah, so this is also related a little bit to what diversive and epistemic curiosity is about. Yeah, so what I'm interested is not on the superficial knowledge, but on the deep knowledge. Yeah. It's not the same to know a lot of fancy words. Let's put it this way. It's not the same to know a lot of fancy words than to write a poem with these fancy words. Yes. So you see, the whole is much more than the parts. Yes. And this is what I'm trying to focus on. I think that the knowledge that is most valuable is the one that is below this superficial knowledge that is easy to scratch. Yes. But then how do we perceive this kind of deep knowledge? I came up with something called the curse of perception. Yeah? Because if you remember, I said that being able to read this book and trying to understand it, it gave me a sort of perception that others didn't have. And for me, this was a curse. Yes, this was a curse because it made me feel lonely. Yes. So the curse of perception. What is the curse of perception? In order to arrive at this deep knowledge, we have to have our eyes very open. Yeah. And here I have a picture of Argus Panoptes. He was the watcher of the cow Io. yes, in Greek mythology, and basically he had 100 eyes, yes. And then I also have the Owl of Athena here, and I think it's very self-explanatory why the symbol of wisdom is the Owl of Athena, because she's a bird with a big eyes, you know. And could we compete with a bird when trying to catch a prey like a mouse in the middle of the night? No, we couldn't. Why? Because the bird, it has the big eyes and is very patient, you know, and it would launch itself into the mouse. So imagine that the mouse is the knowledge that we're pursuing, and what makes her at the top of the food chain there in the forest is that she is very perceptive. Yes. So if we want to if we want to find deep knowledge, we have to be rapacious, like the Owl of Athena. Yes. One of the points also that with regards to the choice of words here, the curse of perception, the Stoic philosophers, and especially Cicero, in his Tusculan, in the book of the Tusculana, he tells us that the wise man doesn't suffer. I don't agree with that. If anything, I would say it's the opposite. Yes. The wise man suffers, and woman, of course, because you feel more, yeah. But we don't have to bash Cicero too much, because he wrote his this disquisition after his daughter died. So you have to be comprehensive also about this. So, I mean, we're talking about the curse of perception, and if why isn't everybody able to feel this, right? It's like, why when I went up to people with this book, they weren't able to feel this. Well, I argue that everyone is able to feel it. Yes, it's just that you have to try to convince them. Yeah? You have to convince them with the passion. Yes, and sometimes, you know, the only joy of the miserable is to have companions in misfortune, and that the loneliness that we feel when we are deep into these topics is a shared loneliness, because the loneliness that I felt when reading this is not only felt by physicists, it's also felt by poets, it's also felt by artists. Yes. So, do you think, for example, when I say this is a curse, do you think that we would be happier being blind or being deaf? I don't think so. So it's a curse. I call it a curse, but I don't think it's a curse, because being blind or being deaf is worse than anything I can think of. Yes. So how do we know that we're looking into the deep knowledge with this rapacious kind of perception that I talked about? How do we know that this is the kind of knowledge that we're searching? Well, because if our question begets another question, then I think that we're looking at the right kind of knowledge. So, for example, a kid tells us, what is the name of the bird that is singing outside? Yeah, and we say it's a sparrow. All right, but then the kid asks, and why does it sing? You know, and that's a very interesting question. You know, it's not as direct. Yeah, so the superficial kind of knowledge would be, what is the name of the sparrow? But the deep knowledge would be, why does it sing? And I think that in order to access this very deep knowledge that I talked about, I think that what we have to do is to think like kids. That's what we have to do. We have to think like children, and then we will be at the doors of this deep kind of knowledge. Yeah. So now that I have talked about knowledge, I will talk about what kind of alternatives do we have for being happy. Yeah. So if knowledge wouldn't make me happy, what kind of alternatives do I have? And let's explore a little bit human nature. Happiness and wealth, for example. Yeah, maybe I would be happier just being super wealthy and not caring about anyone and just living in a yacht in the Bahamas. That's it. Yeah. But then what I try thinking is, okay, but if we accumulate wealth, yeah, and we're happy because we're accumulating wealth, then actually we are unhappy that we haven't accumulated all the wealth, right? So everything that we haven't accumulated yet is making us feel unhappy. So the more we accumulate, the more dissatisfied we are, because this is human nature. We don't have a limit for our greed either. Yeah. And then when we have accumulated all the wealth in the world, yes, we're the richest man or woman in the world. Okay, do you think that, for example, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos have stopped their hunger, for example, or their thirst? Even if they are ultra wealthy, they still have the need to drink and to eat, because wealth does not stop your hunger or your thirst. Yes. So I try to imagine it like this. Would it be the same if I'm thirsty? Would it feel the same if I drank water from the Nile or from a little base like this? It doesn't matter. If I'm thirsty, I will take the water wherever it is, from the little base, and that's it. Yes. So what's really the point, no? And then you can say, well, maybe if I am very wealthy and I try to work for accumulating wealth, then I will be able to dedicate myself to knowledge more easily without so many burdens. Yeah. But then I say, okay, but you're putting too much faith on the ineffability, on the infallibility of human life. It's like, well, yes, maybe you're alive today and tomorrow, but who knows, in 5 years, 10 years, so trying to postpone your happiness is not an excuse, So what I try to say in the dialogue as well is to try to pursue knowledge from the moment that you are conscious that knowledge is something worthy of pursuing, yeah, and not relying on your fortune, on your own fortune. Yes. So no, I wouldn't say that wealth would make me happy or 100% happy just having wealth. Yeah. But then what about beauty? Yeah. And here we have the Judgment of Paris from Rubens. Yes. Well, Paris is going to give the golden apple to Aphrodite, yeah, because she has promised him Helena of Troy. Yes.
That's Helena.
What?
He promised. Aphrodite promised to Paris to be loved by people he wants.
Yes. So basically, okay, and then it's Helena, the most beautiful woman on planet Earth, basically. So here we have Athena and also Hera. Yes. By the way, this is an interesting painting because you can see that Rubens is flexing, basically. Flexing his art. Why? Because he's drawing a man with this pose, so you're seeing the back of the man, here you're seeing the front of a man, and here you see a woman's portrait from 3 different angles. See, from the front, from the side, from the front, and then from the back. So he was a cheeky bastard, this guy. But he was a good painter for sure, yes. But then I also, the same as we did with knowledge, I try to argue that there are 2 kinds of beauty: the superficial beauty, the beauty that we see when we see a handsome man or a beautiful woman, yeah. And then we have the other kind of beauty, the permanent beauty that I will talk about now. And of course, physical beauty is a limited wealth, yes, because we grow older. So if I would rely on my looks now to be happy, then I know that this is short-lived. At some point, this will disappear, yes. So what about this physical beauty can be a very important gateway to love. Of course, I argue for that, is that, of course, it's a magnetizing effect, right? You become attracted to someone when you look into her eyes. But then what you see inside of her goes beyond this mere facade. There's much more inside that you will perceive with this curse of perception that we were talking about. Yeah, the curse of perception allows us to go beyond. Yeah, and for example, this kind of permanent beauty is the kind of beauty that we see in nature. It's a kind of beauty that is not caduceus. Yeah. So, for example, you have when you know a little bit about science and about biology, then you start looking at flowers, and you not only see beautiful flowers, well, you see all the processes involved in the flower, and you see the biology of it, and you see that, for example, insects, they are attracted by the colors. Well, then it means that insects can see the color, which begs the question: do insects have an aesthetic value, an aesthetic sense? Yes? I think these are beautiful questions. Or then you look into pillars of creation. This is a nebula. This is so someone who is not scientifically literate, no problem, you can read about science and you can be interested in it and learn more. Well, I can tell you that this is not only a beautiful picture, but it's also the nursery of stars. Like, here's where stars are born, and it looks beautiful, but then you go beyond and you say, okay. So our sun came from a cloud just like this, yes? So it's like seeing ourselves in this picture almost. Or then you have the beauty also in pure mathematics, and this is something called the Julia set. Yeah, it's a fractal. Yeah, fractal is a structure that repeats itself ad infinitum. Yeah. And one of the beautiful things is also that fractals can be observed in nature. Yeah. So, again, when I talked about the curse of perception, the more and more I think about it, I don't think it's a curse. I think it's something beautiful and something that can make people, can move people, yes. So yeah, I think we should aspire to this profound beauty. But then we also have another option. It's like, what about happiness in fame and honor, yes? Because if you think about it, fame allows us to live a little bit more, even when we're dead. Why? Because our name lives on. Yes. So it's some sort of like extension of us. Yeah. But then, because we still talk about Dante, and we still talk about Homer even. Yeah. Or the Epic of Gilgamesh, we're still talking about these people who are like thousands of years dead since they died, yeah. But then, as I was thinking about this, and I say, okay, but what happens if I think I'm a good musician and I enjoy some good fame and reputation right now, but what happens if 50 years from now comes Mozart #2 and then relegates my name to mere nothingness, Or for example, I think I'm a very good sculptor and people praise me for my sculptures, but then a volcano erupts, like in Napoli, suddenly erupts and destroys all my work. Yeah. So as Petrarca would say, and this is something that Petrarca wrote, fame causes a second death. Because when fame extinguishes, we die again. Our name dies again. Yeah. So at some point, the humanity will disappear, and this extra life that we have had will come to an end. So I don't think happiness in fame and honor is worthy. Yeah, it will not make me immortal. Yes. I have tried to summarize these 3 points: wealth, beauty, and fame into a story that I think is fun and interesting. It's about Sardanapalus' epitaph. He was an old Assyrian king, yeah, and Aristotle, Cicero, and St. Augustine reference him. Why? Because let's try to read what he says. The epitaph is what you have on your tomb, yeah, when you die. So he wrote it for himself. And this is what the guy says. He says, "Yes, I am dust, though I was king of mighty Nineveh." Yeah, I was famous and I was rich, yes? I have only what I have eaten, what nonsense I have committed, what joys I have received through passion, but my many rich possessions are now utterly dissolved. This is a wise counsel for living, and I shall forget it never. Let him who wants it acquire gold without end. This is what it's telling us, yeah? And this guy, I think he died while his palace was on fire in his harem, you know? In his harem. So, and you know what Aristotle says? Well, this guy that is very proud about being rich and being able to eat everything he wanted and being able to, he had his harem, as many women as he wanted, you know. Aristotle says, well, the same could be said about a cow or an ox, you know, that he ate as much as he wanted, and that's it. And then St. Augustine, you know what he says? St. Augustine says that the Romans would have dedicated a temple to this guy if he was Rome. Because we know what the kinds of we know what kind of things happen with Rome sometimes. Yes, I mean, some of the leaders their moral compasses were a bit off, I would say. Something that, for example, Suetonius says about Julius Caesar is that Caesar was the husband to every woman and the woman to every husband, or something like this. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, this guy epitomizes what I have been talking about. Yeah, I don't think I would be happy being like this guy. Yeah, and I don't know if anyone here would. Yes, because he ended up being dust anyways. Yeah. So now, when we look at the three dimensions that I have talked about, wealth, beauty, and fame, I have been saying a word several times, which is to die, and that we're trying to seek immortality. Yes. So what are we searching for when we're looking for happiness in wealth, fame, or beauty? And I think this is a good way to exemplarize this. This is some drawings by Mucha, the seasons. And here you can see spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Yes, I think that what we have been trying to search for is a kind of way to be immortal. Yes, to transcend our human mortality and limitations, because that's the defining characteristic of humankind: is that we die. That's it. We die. And we cannot do anything about it. Yes? What we would like to be is like the seasons, like this girl right here. That our time just circles. Yes? That we start in winter, but it doesn't matter, because then we will come to spring, and then to summer, and then to autumn, and then winter again. But this is not how it works. We start in the summer and we end in the winter. That's it. And this is something, it's not myself who has thought about this, it's Horace, actually. Horace, one of the three canonical Latin poets, yes. In one of his odes, he mentions this, yeah. So, then the question, I think, can be translated into saying, okay, if I want to be happy, can I find something infinite that makes me happy? Yes, because I want to be infinite, I want to transcend my own mortality. Is there anything at all? If I cannot rely on wealth, if I cannot rely on fame or beauty, what else is there, you know? Now I'm starting to sound like a Stoic philosopher. It's like, well, I should resign myself and go to my room and start and read about St. Augustine, and that's it. No, I think there is something very important that we haven't talked about, which is love, yes? Love. This is Klim's kiss, yeah? And here I have written this verse here from Virgil, my favorite verse ever. In Latin, it's omnia vincit amor et nos quedamus amori, which means love overcomes everything. Let us too yield to love, yes? Why? Because if you think if we're trying to find an infinite, yeah? One of the first things we should think about is that, for example, what kind of infinity is there that we have felt, for sure, all of us, at least once in our lives? It's love. Because when you find that person, you feel that there's nothing in the way, that your love for this person is infinite, yes? So So love can make us happy, yes? Let's leave this idea here. But I also argue that knowledge is also infinite. Infinite, why? Because here you have a drawing of a short essay by Borges, yeah, from the 20th century. And this essay right here, I recommend that everyone reads it. It's like 5 pages long. It's called The Library of Babel. And what he's trying to argue is that there is this library with infinite number of rooms, and filled with books, and in this library you have all the books that will ever be written. Why? Because he argues that by combining different words you have limitless combinations. Yeah? And from this he argues that knowledge is infinite. Yeah, and you have this library. Yes. So knowledge is a good candidate to make me happy, just like love, yeah, because it's infinite, yeah. But then you ask, okay, but since knowledge is infinite, maybe it will happen the same as with wealth. I will try to accumulate as much as possible, and I will feel that I don't have everything that I haven't read or learned yet will make me unhappy. No, but there is a price to pay to enter to this library, actually, which is that the one who reads must choose. The thing is not about reading as many books as possible. The thing is knowing which books to read. That's extremely important, yes? And which books to read, I argue that there are canons. Just like there are canons of beauty, there are canons of knowledge as well. And I think that one of the purposes of this association should be to try to go back to the canon, to the books that have been read and studied for centuries, even millennia, because they preserve a sort of aesthetic value that has overcome fashions and that has overcome wars and earthquakes. Yeah. So the important part here is that knowledge is infinite, but we have to choose which books to read. And we have also to be humble, yeah, to understand that we will never know everything, yes. A third dimension of infinity that I could think of course, God, yeah. God is infinite. And since we are limited and we want to try to achieve infinity, we have created the idea of God. And here you have God as almost like the demiurge or the creator, right? It's like measuring the world. This is what we have tried to do in the past, but we will talk a lot about it when we start the next lectures on the Poetic Reason, which is my book on God. Yes. Why did we come up with the idea of God? So God, I mean, in short summary, I mean, I think that the inception of the idea of God is that we as human beings, being limited and mortal, we look up, and we see the stars, and we want to be like the stars because the stars don't change in a human lifespan. Yeah, they are immutable. They are there. We will not be able to reach them or corrupt them with our touch. Yes. And this is what we would like for ourselves, and this is why we created God, yes? But then you have also all of these kinds of arguments to say, well, God also involves fate, and He's taking care of us, but I believe that this is lazy thinking. It goes against the idea that we presented at the beginning, that we want to be adolescents, yeah, and that we want to let go of our parents and be able to think for ourselves, yes? So God, we made Him infinite, yeah, omnipresence, omnipotent, yeah, and omniscient, yeah. So He knows everything. He is everywhere at the same time, But what isn't God? God is not one thing. Then that is very important. If God is all these things, if God is infinite, then God is not limited, yes, and we are limited. So imagine this. I mean, we know or we feel something that God doesn't feel. In which place does this put Him? Yeah. So we know something more than Him. We know how it feels to be limited. So this third dimension of infinity should leave us cold, because, as I say, it's not a true infinity. I mean, we know something else, something that God doesn't know. Yes, so it's not a true infinity. I don't think we should. This kind of idea would make me happy. Yes. So when we talk about these kinds of ideas that maybe would make us happy, these quote unquote lies that we tell ourselves, like, but I shouldn't worry about it. God is taking care of us, and everything will be sorted out. And these kinds of ideas, I imagine them as being like imagine our lives are a lyre, yes, una lira, yeah, a musical instrument, yeah, with strings, I think that all these lies that we tell to ourselves, like, well, at least I am rich, it's good, they are just tensioning the strings of our lives, yeah, and they are distorting the music that we play with our lives. So those who are not perceiving the sound, and I go back to the curse of perception, those who are not willing to see beyond what is there, yes, they will not realize that the music sounds more and more bad, yeah. And what happens when they start telling so many lies to themselves that they keep tensioning the strings, tensioning until they break the strings and the music stops happening, yeah. And this is a very, very, very dangerous proposition, yes? So I argue that knowledge brings back the harmony to the musical instrument that we're playing. So knowledge, instead of tensioning, it makes sure everything is being harmonized, yes? So then someone could argue, okay, but then you are trying to seek knowledge because you are fearful of the lies that you're telling to ourselves, and that maybe this will end up breaking the strings. No. We do not seek knowledge out of fear, yes? We don't seek knowledge out of fear, because that's a really bad motivation. When you have fear, you may act irrationally, yes, and you may not think about the consequences. So no, we don't think knowledge makes us happy because it makes us less fearful, yes. And what is the greatest fear that we have? And this is something that I have already mentioned. What is the greatest fear that humans have? Is dying, yes? Dying. And not only dying, but also seeing others that we love die, yes? So we seek immortality, yeah? So everything we have talked about right now, I think that you can agree with me that we're trying to overcome our limitations, yes? So we're trying to be immortal. We're trying to be immortal, but if we were immortal, what would be the point? I mean, if we had all the time in eternity for ourselves, what would be the point of waking up every morning out of bed and go out of bed? Because we could do it tomorrow or the day after or 1,000 years in the future or 1 million years in the future. We wouldn't have any motivation to do anything at all if we were immortal, yes? We wouldn't have any motivation to dream, because there would be enough time to accomplish all the dreams. With enough time, who knows, yeah? And we wouldn't have any motivation to love either. Yes? And love, we have seen that a life with love is a happy life. And I would argue that a life without love is not a happy life. I think a world without kindness is not worth living in, actually. And without love as well. So, wait a second. We have concluded then that, because we're knowledgeable, we know about our limitations, yes? And because we know about our limitations, we are compelled to love. And that is my motivation. And this is why I don't have any picture here, because I would like all of you to think about someone that you love. And to realize that because we know we are limited beings ourselves, we have a reason to love. And that is my motivation. It's not a consolation. It's a motivation to say, okay, I know about my limitations. I know who I am. I am a human being. And therefore, I love. Yes. And love makes me happy. Therefore, being knowledgeable makes me happy as well. So just the epilogue here. Here is, told you about this, Lorenzo. Here is a beautiful painting from Caravaggio. This is in the style of chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro means light and shadow, you could say, no? Why? Because you see the high contrast here. Yeah, it's a very high contrast. And this is the calling of Saint Matthew. Basically, in the Gospel of Saint Matthew, you see him. He writes about when Jesus goes into the tax office, and then he points at Matthew here, one of the apostles. Yeah, and then he says, "Okay, come with me. I call to you, and you come with me." Yes, this is Saint Peter. Yes, and I want you to look at this painting and see how Jesus here, with his aureola here, is trying to call Matthew. Matthew is a tax collector. He's a tax collector. He deals with money, with one of the wealths we have spoke about. Yes, and you see how the face of the guy says, "Who? Me?" It's like almost unbelievable. It's like, me? And look at his colleagues. They are too busy looking at wealth here, at monies, at coins, to realize that the Lord is here. Yes? So this, I think, it perfectly summarizes what we have been talking about. Because replace Jesus with knowledge, it's like knowledge and the will to know, the dare to know, yeah, it's like it touches everyone. You can be a tax collector, you can be whoever comes for you and says, come with me, there is a wonderful world that I will show you. Yes. So I want all of us to feel like Saint Matthew, that even if we say, who, me? Yes, everyone. It's possible for everyone. Yes. And lastly, just as a last slide here, here is the Turner and the Fishermen at Sea. It's what I say that in the manifesto as well, when we say that we depart and we try to find our own way into the sea, knowing that knowledge makes us happy because it gives us a reason to love, is enough to depart and say, okay, I will find my own way and I will try to, I am motivated to become wiser, yes? And there's so much to discover and so much to read. But how to overcome this task? Well, if all of us, literally all humanity, is sailing into the unknown, because there are so many things we don't know. We said that knowledge is infinite. If there are so many things, then how can we say that someone is taking the right course? Yeah, just because Socrates sailed that way, it doesn't mean that we cannot sail the other way, because we're all traveling into the unknown. Yeah, so as long as we depart, that's it. And sometimes, when we depart in our search for knowledge, we will not receive the questions we were expecting. That's number one. And number two, we should be humble enough to understand that along some paths of the cosmic discovery, there will be times when we will have to be content with just asking the questions themselves. And that is knowledge as well. And I will finish like Cicero. I will celebrate this conclusion that we have reached. Knowledge should make us happy, yeah. And this is all I have to say on the subject. So that's pretty much it.